Formula One is a complicated sport. There's huge amounts of pressure to make a name for yourself against the very best drivers in the world. Talent can only get you so far because there's a lot more to success in this game than people think. Of course, you gotta have a work ethic, being obsessed with constant improvement and evolution of your skill set. When rising through the ranks, there's also the driver academy that you're a part of that makes a difference. The ultimate goal is to drive for one of the big three teams, so your job is to show them why you're the next big thing. And when that door of opportunity opens, you have to step up to the plate to reassure the team that they didn't make a mistake in signing you. Thankfully, the car suits you well. Really well. So well in fact, you're able to win 3 races and outperform your teammate who has just come off of winning 4 straight championships. You finally established yourself as the firm number 1 for the next few years, but don't see the kind of results you were hoping for. After all, the aim is to win a world championship at the end of the day. And this is where decision making also comes into the equation. Is it worth giving up what I have now for something that could be better, but at the same time could also end up being a mistake? Well, you decide to trust your gut and take a risk by signing with a new team, in hopes that they'll help you achieve your dream. Your driving prowess still shines through, but you're not winning races anymore, and faced with another career-defining decision. Stay and trust the process, or leave for something that's an unknown. Again, you choose the latter, but this time around, it goes horribly wrong. The car doesn't suit your driving style, and you can't seem to figure out why. You try everything in your power to adapt, but nothing is working. There are moments where you're celebrating a breakthrough, and moments where you're left in complete disbelief. And just like that, your reputation is gone. Having entered the team as one of the most valuable and sought-after drivers on the grid, you're now being forced out to make way for a kid who's just making his debut. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of Daniel Ricciardo. It's a sad, yet justifiable, yet harsh reality. I honestly don't know how to feel about all of this because, like most people, I love Daniel Ricciardo. There's obviously his smile that has basically become a brand at this point. Then there's the unique charisma and sense of humour that attracts most Formula One fans like a magnet. A lot of people resonate with how authentic his personality is and can relate to him in ways they can't with other drivers. But as likeable as Ricciardo is, F1 is not a popularity contest. It's a life-threatening, fiercely competitive and highly pressurizing environment that simply doesn't have any room for softies. And no, this isn't me calling Daniel a softie, I'm simply trying to put into perspective the reality about Formula One. Because what's portrayed on the outside can often give people a false perception of the truth. You'll see a driver like, Lando for example, how he acts and the way he behaves away from the track and think that he's just a pushover. But the second he steps in that car and the visor comes down, he becomes ruthlessly competitive. As much as it is a team sport, your main competition is the guy on the other side of the garage. Well, unless you're in a championship fight against another team, but that's besides the point. The fact that Lando has 4 times as many points as Daniel in the same car is scary. It's easy to criticize McLaren for the manner in which they've handled the situation. Just a couple of months ago, Zach Brown was talking about their relationship being better than ever. It seems as though McLaren are being disingenuous about the state of affairs, and quote-unquote backstabbed Ricciardo. However, as I mentioned earlier, this is a ruthless game, and McLaren fans shouldn't take it personally. Remember how Racing Point ditched Sergio Perez for Sebastian Vettel? He only found out when it was announced, and had been led to believe that he wouldn't be replaced. For someone who saved the team from being shut down altogether and carried them to their first win in history, Checo showed nothing but loyalty and gave his everything to help them succeed. On the other hand, Lawrence Stroll didn't show the same kind of appreciation and went behind his back to give his seat to Vettel. I'm not saying it's right. I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's just the way it goes in F1. If anything, McLaren have a good reason to be firing Daniel because he hasn't lived up to McLaren's expectations. When Checo got ditched, he was performing better than he's ever performed in his career. At the moment, we can't officially say Ricciardo has been dropped because ultimately, it's up to the Australian whether he stays with a working-based team. And based on some of the reports I've been reading, it's expected that the team will have to fork out around $21 million to pay him off. This whole thing is basically one big L for McLaren, and you've got to feel for them as much as one feels for Daniel. At the end of the day, it just hasn't worked out. But But I also think it'll do Ricciardo a lot of good moving to another team where he can show the world what he's capable of again. On September 12th, 2021, Daniel Ricciardo incredibly won the Italian Grand Prix, putting an end to McLaren's 9-year win drought. Despite struggling for most of the season, this particular weekend, he was on it. For once, he felt comfortable in the car and could extract performance out of it. What's more is that the MCL35M actually had race-winning pace for the first time all year, and he perfectly seized the opportunity. "I never left," is what he said in response to his critics when crossing the finish line. And I still believe that, in there somewhere, is the Daniel Ricciardo we've come to know. I'm sure a lot of you are wondering why Daniel has struggled to get to grips with the McLaren, particularly this year. Well, for starters, the characteristics of this new car haven't changed fundamentally compared to 2021. And what do I mean by that? It still naturally performs better in the high-speed corners, but struggles a lot more with the medium-speed sections. It's also more prone to understeering, which doesn't bode well with his style of late braking. When watching an onboard comparison between him and Norris in France, it was clear that Ricciardo was trying to gain lap time by carrying more speed on entry, but ended up having lower apex speeds and compromised exits. In contrast, Lando was using more of a slow in and fast out technique that helped him maintain much tighter and faster lines around Paul Ricard. But don't think that just because he's beating Ricciardo, that Norris isn't struggling with the MCL36 as well. During the Hungarian Grand Prix weekend, Lando explained how the car is, quote, "not what I want for my driving style," and that you have to adapt to it. And that's the key word here, adaptability. Clearly, Norris has found it easier to tailor his way of driving to better suit the characteristics of this year's McLaren compared to Ricciardo. Up to now, Daniel still hasn't been able to figure out why the car reacts so unpredictably when he's behind the wheel. It's been frustrating, but I don't think it's impacted his confidence. In the right car, Ricciardo is a phenomenal driver. To diminish his capabilities based on just 2 years of struggle would be ignorant to say the least. And I'm not saying he's exempt from criticism because it's justified. But what I've noticed about F1 fandom nowadays is that the narrative surrounding a driver's ability ebbs and flows on a race-by-race basis. One week they're doing well and everyone's lifting them up. The next week they're not doing so well and everyone is beating them down. Rarely do people take into account the various other elements that could be affecting a driver's performance, and they simply boil it down to being either good or bad. As a racing driver, you don't simply lose the ability to drive well. Ricciardo's wins in the past tell you all you need to know about the quality he can provide in the right environment. I could sit here and try and explain to you how good Daniel was during his time at Red Bull, but honestly, I'd recommend just watching those races for yourself, if you haven't already or need a reminder. Everyone has their strengths, and everyone has their weaknesses. This McLaren stint has shown that Ricciardo isn't the most adaptable when it comes to cars which don't suit his style, but it hasn't taken away from the caliber of driver he's capable of being. Where the Aussie goes next is yet to be seen. It could be back to Alpine, it could be another team like Williams or Haas. Who knows, we might not even see Daniel Ricciardo on the grid next year, which would be incredibly sad. But assuming that he stays in F1 and goes back to his former team, it'll probably be quite awkward to start with. Having ditched the Renault project after just 1 year in hopes of finding more success with McLaren, it will look a bit silly on Daniel's part. But they did split on very good terms, and we're starting to see some progress. The environment will be a little bit different compared to when he left, as the management structure has changed, and it may take a few races to get used to the car again. Also, Esteban Ocon will most definitely not be the same driver he was back in 2020, so if Ricciardo does go back, he'll need to be on his A game from the get-go. But all this is speculation, and we're yet to find out exactly how it all plays out. Until then, I remain firm in saying that Ricciardo still has a lot left to give in this sport. I don't think he's finished with F1 just yet. Hopefully, he will find his way again, and remind everybody who the true Daniel Ricciardo really is. I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know what you think of Ricciardo's future in the comment section below. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel with bell notifications to keep up to date with my latest videos in the future. Also be sure to share this video around with others who you think will enjoy it as well. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.